Chapter 71. She finally met kind-hearted people and saw their warm concern for each other. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although Wanchocho was still worried about the wolf at home, she felt much better now. While they were hastily making their way to the cliff, she asked the kid, "Mou, can I call you little you? What's your older brother's name?" "Sure." Mou nodded, then he strangely fell silent for a few seconds before dully answering, "My older brother is called Mo Mao." Wanchocho. T/N. Mao as in cat. Wanchocho asked, "What about your grandpa?" "He's called Grandpa Mo." Mou rubbed his head. "Grandpa won't tell us his name. He said that calling out his name would attract fiends." Wanchocho heard these words, but she didn't take it seriously. She thought that was just a joke that Grandpa Mo told these kids. Feeling a bit sad for this family, she sighed. "Was Grandpa Mo the one that named you and your younger sister?" Mou was silent again. "Older brother named us." Wanchocho. "So because he was a cat demon, he named one Mou and the other one Mo. This older brother didn't seem that reliable." Wanchocho wanted to laugh, but she held back. While they were speaking, they had walked back to the surrounding area of her home on the way to the cliff. Wanchocho looked at the familiar cave up ahead. It had become her home in the past few days. As she thought of that stupid wolf, who had led the fiend away on a dark, snowy night, her heart felt warm. "Up ahead, that's the cave I live in." The two of them were close to the cave. Their footsteps made a rustling sound as they walked. Inside the cave, Yuanju had regained consciousness and was slowly opening his eyes. Shortly after his little human wife had left, that dark energy in his body had rushed out again. It had been a struggle to drink the 3 cups of water she had left behind. After struggling for a long time on the edge of pain and abyss, he finally suppressed the fiend energy in his body. Yes, it was fiend energy. Yuanju's throat was bitter. He was restraining himself from vomiting blood again. Although he was half-delirious when he was intermittently battling the fiend energy in his body, after 4 rounds of this, he discovered that it was fiend energy that was trying to devour him. When did his body get so much fiend energy? Was it from the fiend that had tried to attack them? Or, was it remnants from the attacking fiends in the beast tide? Or could it be, even earlier than that? Yuanju's expression was gloomy. A bloody light gradually appeared in his blind eyes. Just as he was about to show an even more terrifying expression, a familiar voice came from outside of the cave. It was Wanchocho's voice. His little human wife. Yuanju was suddenly flustered. He didn't know how to face her. By the time he returned to his senses, he had already reflexively closed his eyes and properly lied down. He even put away the fangs that had recently come out. He couldn't stop his big tail, which had recovered a bit of strength, from wagging. But then, he heard that there was more than one pair of footsteps with his keen hearing. He clenched his big hands into a fist, and his chest felt tight. He sniffled lightly and found the scent of a very weak male human in the cold air. His mood plummeted. Why? Why had she brought back a male human after going out on a trip? Wasn't it enough that she had Grey Wolf Tianluo? Did it have to be a human? Was a Grey Wolf not okay? Or was it because a disabled wolf wasn't okay? He didn't know why he felt so hurt and inferior. Yuanju, whose entire world was in darkness, tightly pressed his pale lips together. He fell into a sort of panic and pain that he had never felt before. Mr. Grey Wolf accidentally pierced 10 holes into the animal skin that Wanchocho had recently sewn up. His heart ached and his chest felt stuffy. His tail, which had been wagging before, stopped moving. Yuanju didn't know why his eyes felt so painful to the point that he almost couldn't bear it. He felt that the fiend energy, which he had struggled to suppress, was surging up again. It surged forward like a wave that swallowed up his meridians, causing him unbearable pain. When he was about to lose self-control, he heard Yuan Qiuqiu's voice again. "Little you, this is my husband and I's home. The snow is getting heavier. You're a little kid. Come in first and hide out from the snow at the cave entrance. Wait there for me." Translator Ramblings. It's mentioned in chapter part 47 that the fiend, who tried to attack them, could smell that Yuan Ju comes from a very noble bloodline of fiends, and from this chapter, it seems that Yuan Ju is unaware of this. When I was reading the novel for the first time, I wildly speculating that maybe the fiend energy isn't entirely bad, and it's more of a fail-safe that comes out when Yuan Ju is close to death so he can heal up. Like how Inuyasha, male protagonist in a manga about a half-demon and a high school priestess, loses his rationality when his demon blood takes over, and the trigger for the demon blood to take over is when he's gravely injured. Chapter 72. But didn't you say that you've been intimate with your husband several times? 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yuan Qiuqiu had spoken quietly in order to avoid disturbing Mr. Grey Wolf, who might still be resting in the bedroom. However, her quiet voice was no match for Mr. Grey Wolf, who had perked up his ears to eavesdrop. The words, "This is my husband and I's home, little kid, hide out from the snow," were all clearly heard by him. His wife's soft and gentle voice didn't sound forced at all. It seemed that she really was willing to tell outsiders that this was their home. Home. This word felt both strange and familiar. It was a precious thing that he had never possessed before. He couldn't put into words what he was feeling right now, but the inexplicable grievance and pain he had been feeling scattered like haze underneath the sunlight. He slowly came back to himself. Even the fur on his big tail, which had bristled after he had smelled the scent of a human male, returned to normal. Now that he was clear-headed, he realized that he had torn up the animal skin that his wife had sewed up. He quietly turned his claws back into nails and covered up the 10 holes with his big hands. Enduring the pain, he kept his ears perked up to listen to conversation outside. After Yuan Qiuqiu said those words to the thin, little boy, she saw his expression becoming very nervous. She smiled and said, "Our home is very big. You can just stay at the entrance to hide from the snow. You don't have to see my husband." It was very obvious that Mou relaxed when he heard that he didn't have to see Yuan Ju. He looked Yuan Qiuqiu in the eye. His slightly mature-looking face showed the awkwardness and childishness that was more appropriate for his age. Mou's hand, which was holding the bone stick, trembled a bit. And then, he rather bravely walked to the cave's entrance with shaking hands. I'm not scared of why. Your husband. It's not like the former chief would suddenly start eating children. Hearing the voice of a child, Yuan Ju's residual vexed feelings finally went away. The furry ear that was injured softly drooped down and only one ear remained perked up. Yuan Qiuqiu enigmatically smiled at Mou and teased him, "You're really not scared." Mou scratched his head in embarrassment and patted the snow off his body. "I'm not scared." Mou hesitated for a moment and looked into the dark cave at the animal skin curtain covering the bedroom's entrance. He gritted his teeth and said, "I used to be very scared of him." "But didn't you say that you've been intimate with your husband several times?" Yuan Qiuqiu didn't know why this anxious kid would suddenly say these words. Looking very serious, he analyzed, "Since you're okay even after being intimate with him, I probably should be okay too." Yuan Qiuqiu. The eavesdropping Yuan Ju. He was overcome with shock. Heat rushed to his cheeks and quickly spread to the tips of his ears and then to his neck. It felt as if all the fur on his body was burning. Did he hear that wrong? Why did that human boy say those words? It couldn't be that Yuan Qiuqiu had told him that, right? But how come he didn't remember being intimate with his wife? It couldn't be that he had done something beastly to his wife when he was unconscious. Yuan Ju fell into chaos. He desperately tried to recall what happened during the past few days when he was unconscious. Could it be that he had bitten her? He knew that Wan Qiuqiu smelled very fragrant and she was so soft too. She looked so delicious. She was the favorite type of food for fiends and demons that had gone crazy. But if he had bitten her, why didn't he have any impression of that? Even if he had been in half-demon form and his teeth were sharp, he should feel something if he bit her. Unless, she meant that he had groped her. But, he had always controlled his sleeping posture. Other than the first time, when he had deliberately fallen on top of her, he had never crossed the line. Recalling the first time they met and the softness he had accidentally touched, Yuan Ju blushed to the point that it looked as if blood was going to drip down in the next second. If he had really groped her several times at that, it was impossible that he would have no impression of that. But if that was true, why would Wan Qiuqiu say that then? Yuan Ju was so perplexed. His head felt dizzy as his imagination ran wild. Chapter 73. But didn't you say that you've been intimate with your husband several times? 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside the cave, Wan Qiuqiu, who was flustered over Mou's words, instinctively looked into the cave and explained in a ruffled manner, "Sure. You can't casually say that type of thing." Mou scratched his head and nodded. Oh. Mou saw that Wan Qiuqiu was blushing. Confused, he said, "Being intimate isn't that big of a deal, right? I'm often intimate with Bo. She likes to pull my hand too." Wan Qiuqiu. Does pulling someone's hand count as being intimate? She looked at Mou's pure eyes and felt like her mind was in the gutter. This, Wan Qiuqiu didn't know how to explain. The intimacy between adults is not the same as the intimacy between children. Mou. Wan Qiuqiu. She sighed and could only take out the phrase that she had heard the most when she was a child. You'll understand when you're older. Mou. He pouted, but he was still sensible enough to not continue asking. Wan Qiuqiu raised her hand and weakly pressed her heated cheek. Little you, wait here for me. I'll come back out soon. Mou obediently nodded. Wan Qiuqiu didn't delay any further and headed towards the bedroom. As the sound of footsteps got closer and closer, Yuan Ju's face got redder and redder. He tried his best to control his breathing so that it was even and calm, pretending to be a sleeping beauty wolf. However, the moment that Wan Qiuqiu lifted the animal skin curtain, she noticed that there was something off. L.RG Mr. Food Reserve's breathing was very heavy as if he was about to start gasping. The fur on his ears and tail were standing up, and his face was extremely red. His scarred handsome face was covered in sweat. Oh no! Wan Qiuqiu's heart leapt up in alarm. She strode over to the stone bed and did what she had done many times in the past few days, place her hand on Mr. Grey Wolf's head to check his temperature. Her hand was very cold and seemed as if it had immediately lowered the heat on his forehead, but it also seemed as if her touch had increased the heat in his body. When Wan Qiuqiu had gotten close to him, Yuan Ju suddenly smelled the faint scent of dried blood. He could smell that she wasn't injured badly. She had probably used her spiritual energy to heal herself and cleaned off most of the blood, so the scent of dried blood was almost completely hidden by Little Yu's scent and he didn't immediately notice. Yuan Ju clenched his big hands, which were underneath the animal skin. The guilt and self-blame was like having a basin of cold water dumped onto him, instantly extinguishing the heat. She had just gone out and got injured. How did she get injured? Where was she injured? Who hurt her? Was it a beast from the nearby forest? Or was it a wolf demon from the fire wolf tribe? As soon as Yuan Ju thought of that possibility, he felt incomparably angry and abhorrence. His expression became vicious too. Wan Qiuqiu saw his ugly expression and thought it was from pain. She was extremely worried. She checked on the almost transparent fiend core and the 3 small wooden cups. When she found out that the cups were empty, she was even more worried. It was only after she confirmed that although Mr. Grey Wolf's expression was twisted, the fiend energy wasn't moving in Mr. Grey Wolf that she finally relaxed a bit. Fortunately, the fever is gone. She wryly smiled and hesitated for a moment before deciding to condense more healing water to leave at home just in case before leaving the cave. This meant that she would have to ask Mou to wait longer. Chapter 74. His human wife, who had come here because of a mishap, was very special. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanchocho felt bad that she was making Mou wait longer, but she still picked up a wooden stool and an animal skin she was using to cover Mr. Grey Wolf's legs, lifted the curtain, walked to the cave's entrance, and apologetically looked at Mou. Little you, can you sit here and wait for me for a little bit longer? Mou froze in surprise for a moment before nodding. Okay. After his older brother had drunk the treasure, his condition improved a lot, and he even briefly woke up for a few seconds. And so, Mou wasn't as anxious. Little you, thank you. Wanchocho handed him the animal skin. Don't catch a cold. Mou smiled at Wanchocho and didn't refuse her kind intentions. Wanchocho still felt a bit bad. Seeing that there was still warm water in the stone pot, she poured it into a wooden bowl and brought it to Mou. Seeing that the little boy was obediently waiting at the cave's entrance, she hastily went back to the bedroom to condense water. Her footsteps were messy, and her movements were agitated when Yuan Ju smelled the growing scent of spiritual energy in the air. He knew that she was helping him again. She had gone out this time because of him and had even gotten hurt. As for him, he could only lie on the stone bed like a waste of air. Just restraining the fiend energy and enduring the pain consumed all of his strength. He couldn't do anything about the current predicament. He was such a selfish Grey Wolf. He clearly knew that as crippled wolf demon, he was a burden to her in this cold winter. And yet, he was so cunning, so treacherous, and so despicable, pretending to be unconscious. Yuan Ju really wanted to know where she went today, what she did, who was the child that she had brought back, and did he really grope her when he was unconscious? Why was she hurt? Which demons bullied her? Was it those wolf demons in the Fire Wolf tribe? Thinking of the Fire Wolf tribe's wolf demons, Yuan Ju suddenly became uneasy. He irritably shook his ears. An idea became progressively clear and left him increasingly uneasy. Those wolf demons in the Fire Wolf tribe didn't say anything about his curse in front of his wife, right? Thinking of this possibility, Yuan Ju became increasingly alarmed. As the thought of Wanchocho's recent unseen injury along with the smell of dried blood came to mind, Yuan Ju guessed that she had been bullied by those wolf demons. He almost couldn't resist the surging desire to kill those wolf demons. What if? What if those wolf demons had told her? What if? Wanchocho knew that he was cursed. As Yuan Ju thought of this possibility, his nails turned into claws without him knowing. A moment of exerting his strength and he left a deep hand imprint in the stone bed with his claws sunk into it. That clear sound echoed in the bedroom and brought Yuan Ju, who had been about to lose his mind to murderous rage, back to his senses. There was the harsh sound of a stone stool pushing against the floor. The sound came from Wanchocho abruptly standing up. Yuan Ju was a bit flustered. He thought Wanchocho had heard the sound of him damaging the stone bed and realized he was awake. He didn't know how to explain himself to her. With a guilty conscience, he retracted his claws from the stone bed. Ednel.co however, immediately after, there was the sound of something heavy falling at the cave's entrance. The sound was accompanied by a child's violent coughing. The sound of this could be clearly heard in the bedroom. Wanchocho hadn't noticed at all that Mr. Grey Wolf was awake. She hastily opened the animal skin curtain and rushed out. She anxiously called out, "Little you, are you okay? Did you fall?" Hearing these words as well as the violent coughing outside, Yuan Ju realized he made a fatal error in overlooking something. That animal skin, which Yuan Qiuqiu had given to the little boy, had been recently touching his skin. Chapter 75. His human wife, who had come here because of a mishap, was very special, too. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside of the bedroom, the sound of coughing was growing weaker and more pained. Yuan Ju almost instantly realized something. That little boy, little Yu, had probably gotten cursed from coming into contact with something he had used. As soon as that idea occurred to him, Yuan Ju felt as if he had been struck by lightning and his blood was flowing backwards. He almost couldn't stop himself from shaking. In the past few days, when he woke up intermittently, he vaguely realized something about the curse. He didn't know anything about the curse in the past, but since he had gotten seriously injured during the beast tide attack and also when he came close to death last time, he noticed something. That fiend energy unceasingly wreaked havoc in his body, but it didn't seem fatal. It came from within his body and not from the fiends that had attacked him. The blood that contained the fiend energy was like a blood-soaked veil that was hiding the truth. As long as he gently tore off that veil, he would know the truth about the curse that had troubled him for over 20 years. His blood was full of fiend energy. It would passively hurt and curse anything that came near him. It was filthy monster blood. He could vaguely guess what the curse was, but he didn't want to think about it. He felt he was disgusting and was even more afraid that Yuan Qiuqiu would find out. His human wife, who had come here because of a mishap, was very special. She could suppress the fiend energy using her spiritual power and wouldn't be affected by it or get hurt when she got close to him. She didn't know that he was cursed and wouldn't keep her distance from him. She even slept on the same stone bed as him and brought him back on that snowy night. Her attitude towards him was too normal. He had almost forgotten he was cursed and thought of himself as an ordinary crippled Grey Wolf, who was slowly recovering from his injuries, a substitute for Grey Wolf Tianluo, and her husband. He had almost forgotten that he was a chief that had been greatly feared by all human and demons, a monster. But now, because he had been negligent and ignored reality, the child she had brought here was going to die. It was his fault. Even if she could save that child, she would definitely know that he was cursed. The worry that she would know had been lurking at the back of his mind this entire time, but he had deliberately avoided thinking about it. How could she not mind if that little boy at the cave's entrance almost died because of him? There was bitter taste in his throat. Enduring the tearing pain in his head, Yuan Ju squeezed out a strand of demon consciousness. He almost couldn't stop his body from trembling. With a glimmer of hope that his guess would be wrong, he reached out his demon consciousness to see what was happening. He saw Yuan Qiuqiu holding a thin human boy. She looked panicky. That boy was deathly pale, and he kept coughing up blood. On the ground, there was a piece of animal skin stained with blood. It was the animal skin that had recently covered him. It was very obvious that the little boy had been infected by his curse. And Yuan Qiuqiu, she would soon know the truth. His glowing red eyes were teary. He opened his lips, but for the first time, he couldn't find the right words to say. He had just been secretly happy that she had said this was their home. But now, he was about to lose this home. Translator Ramblings. I want to give Yuan Ju a hug. Although Yuan Ju sees the fiend energy as something inherently bad, it's a very good passive defensive mechanism, especially when he's too injured to defend himself against other demons and humans. Chapter 76. Even light would get tired if it encountered creatures that were too dark. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He was going to lose his wife soon. Lose. Yuan Ju didn't know why he used that word, but it felt as if a cold wind swept over him when he thought of that possibility. That feeling felt so oppressive and painful that it felt hard to breathe. His demon consciousness was getting depleted. As the image grew blurry, it froze on Yuan Qiuqiu's thoughtful and serious expression. Yuan Ju pressed his pale lips together as his world plunged into darkness again. He didn't know what he should do right now or what he would do after Yuan Qiuqiu discovered the truth. Overcome with panic, he waited for Wan Qiuqiu's judgment. It felt as his body was encased in ice. At the cave's entrance, Wan Qiuqiu was extremely nervous, but that didn't stop her from trying to lightly shake Mou and ask him what was wrong. After a brief panic, Wan Qiuqiu laid Mou flat on the ground. Holding the small cup that was less than half filled with healing water that she had just condensed, she opened Mou's mouth and fed him the water. Once all of the healing water was drunk, Mou gradually stopped coughing up blood, and his face became slightly rosy. However, he was still unconscious. Little Yu's eyes were closed, and his hand was clenched around the old bone stick. Wan Qiuqiu checked the breath under his nose. After confirming that Little Yu's breathing was gradually stabilizing, she finally sighed in relief. She used her mutant water energy to check why Little Yu would suddenly faint. He had looked healthy to begin with, and he had also drank healing water before coming here. Wan Qiuqiu furrowed her brow as she carefully controlled the amount of energy that she was slowly putting into Mou. As soon as she sensed the result, she groaned. There was actually a trace of fiend energy in Mou's body. If she hadn't used mutant water energy to check, there was no way she would have found out. The mutated water energy from the water that Little Yu had drank was resisting and slowly clearing away the fiend energy from his body. Not only that, she discovered that Mou's body was very weak, far worse than his outer appearance would suggest. There were many areas in his body where his meridians were very weak. It was because of this that the faint fiend energy could cause him so much pain. As for why fiend energy would enter Little Yu's body. In addition to him being susceptible because he was weak, it was probably also because he had touched the animal skin that Mr. Grey Wolf had been using. Wan Qiuqiu's gaze fell on the blood-stained animal skin that had fallen onto the ground. Her eyes were full of guilt and self-blame. This happened because she had been negligent. She clearly knew there was a lot of fiend energy in Mr. Grey Wolf's body, and it made sense that the stuff he used might get contaminated by the fiend energy. And yet, she had carelessly brought it over to Little Yu to use. Compared to the amount of fiend energy in Mr. Grey Wolf's body, the amount emitted by his body was actually very little, and it didn't seem to come from the fiend that Mr. Grey Wolf had killed. That fiend energy was very special and hard to detect. She only slowly noticed its unusualness after helping Mr. Grey Wolf suppress it a few times. Wan Qiuqiu bit her lip and blamed herself even more. Even after she had noticed the fiend energy, she hadn't cared about it because she knew that it couldn't hurt her. Even when it got onto her body, it would automatically be removed by her mutant water energy. Wan Qiuqiu looked at the scattered items on the ground and sighed. She wryly laughed, patted Mou's head, and comforted herself with the thought that Mr. Grey Wolf was fortunately unconscious. Otherwise, if he knew that he had unintentionally hurt someone, and it was a weak little boy too, he would probably blame himself more than she was blaming herself. If that awkward and stubborn Grey Wolf Tianluo knew about this, he would be so upset. Although they hadn't known each for long, Wan Qiuqiu had already figured out Grey Wolf Tianluo's personality for the most part. The first time they met, he had looked frightening, but in reality, he was just a wolf pup silently eating snow. She had brought him back into the cave when he fainted, and he had saved her that night when she had needed him the most. The first words he said to her was, "Stay away," and it was followed by, "1 meter." In the past, she hadn't known why he had set that requirement and thought it was because he didn't like her or that he didn't like to be touched, but now that she thought about those words in light of her new knowledge and came to the conclusion that her original guesses were wrong. Chapter 77. Even light would get tired if it encountered creatures that were too dark. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This might have something to do with the curse that those ungrateful wolf demons in the Fire Wolf tribe had been talking about. It was strange that her mutant water ability could disperse the fiend energy when it came into contact with her as well as clear and heal the effects of the fiend energy on Little Yu, but she couldn't remove the fiend energy from Mr. Grey Wolf's body. Was it because there was too much fiend energy in Mr. Grey Wolf's body? It hadn't occurred to Wanchocho that sensitive gray wolf Tianluo was already awake. Not only that, he had already come up with the miserable drama show of, once the wife found out that her husband wasn't a full demon, she left her crippled husband in anger and disappointment. Wanchocho patted Little Yu's head as she thought about what to do next. His breathing had gradually stabilized. Although Little Yu's cognition had stabilized, she didn't know when he would wake up. He obviously couldn't go with her to pick herbs today. It wouldn't be suitable for him to continue staying here in this cave, which had faint fiend energy. Wanchocho glanced at the sky. She hesitated for a moment before picking up the animal skin on the ground and scurrying to the bedroom. Lifting up the animal skin curtain, Wanchocho stepped into the bedroom, put the dirted animal skin in a wooden basin, poured the melted snow into the stone pot and took everything out of the backpack. Because she was worried about Little Yu, Wanchocho focused on the tasks at hand and didn't say anything. Yuanju, who was in great pain and couldn't move, heard her rushed movements. It felt as if he was being stabbed over and over again by a knife. In the end, his eyes turned an embarrassing red. He desperately pressed his lips together, not allowing himself to make any sound. Was she leaving? She had just found out, and she was going to leave right away. His human wife didn't owe him anything to begin with. She had already been good enough to him. Even light would get tired if it encountered creatures that were too dark. Wanchocho didn't know that Mr. Grey Wolf's sensitive glass heart was about to break. Once she finished sorted everything out, she walked to the stone bed and checked on the transparent fiend core. After thinking it over, she sat down on the stone bed. Was she going to say goodbye? Yuanju did his best to restrain himself. It took up almost all of his energy to not suddenly open his eyes. He didn't want to scare her with his terrifying face. Wanchocho saw his ugly expression and thought he was feeling uncomfortable. She wanted to use her remaining mutated water energy to condense healing water to feed him. With familiarity, she brought her fingers to his lips to drop the water into his mouth. But this time, Mr. Grey Wolf kept his lips tightly pressed together, and the water wouldn't be able to go in. Wanchocho didn't suspect that he was awake. After all, Mr. Grey Wolf wasn't good at acting. If he had woken up, she would have noticed him moving by now. She tried again before helplessly saying with worry, "Husband, does it hurt a lot?" Although Wanchocho's voice was light, when these words fell in Yuanju's ears, it was like a raging inferno that instantly burned away his unease that was overgrown with thorns. It was so warm that his heart almost stopped. Mr. Grey Wolf didn't show any reaction, and Wanchocho ran out of patience. She simply changed her method and started by pushing back the animal skin that covered him. Yuanju. Wanchocho, who saw that not only were there 10 new holes in the animal skin below, there were holes in the stone bed as well. However, it still didn't occur to her that Mr. Grey Wolf was awake right now. She naturally held his hand. While transferring the altered spiritual energy into Mr. Grey Wolf's body, she mumbled to herself, "Did he make these holes when he woke up earlier to drink water?" Preoccupied with thoughts of Little Yu, who was lying on the cold ground outside, Wanchocho was very anxious. Once she was done, she stuffed the fiend core into Mr. Grey Wolf's palm and curved his hand around it into a tight grip. Noel.n, I'm going to send Little Yu home. I hope that you'll be okay. Wanchocho covered him back up with the animal skin. She stroked his big tail once before hastily leaving the bedroom. It was already afternoon. Although Mou's home wasn't far from here, going there and back would still delay her from getting herbs. She had to hurry up. What if there was too much fiend energy in Mr. Grey Wolf's body? Chapter 78. Even light would get tired if it encountered creatures that were too dark. 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanchocho picked up Little Yu from the ground and left the cave. The sound of her footsteps gradually grew distant. Yuanju opened his eyes once he was sure she was far away. He felt there was something especially off with his tail. No one had ever dared to touch his tail. When he was in his demon form, his tail was a powerful weapon. The beasts that had touched his tail were all dead. But she touched his tail. Redness and heat quickly spread on his cheeks. He felt there was a tingly sensation on his tail, and he felt so heated that he almost didn't know how to face his own tail. He felt that he was overreacting. Perhaps, his tail was injured, and that's why he felt so strange when Yuan Qiuqiu casually stroked his tail. Yuan Ju somewhat couldn't bear it. He curled up and slowly reached out to touch his tail in the darkness. His slender and well-defined fingers touched the spot on his tail where Yuan Qiuqiu had touched earlier. However, that spot wasn't injured at all. Other than feeling that his fur was a bit coarse, he didn't feel anything when he touched his tail. Unwilling to accept that, Yuan Ju stroked his tail again. He didn't even let off the tip of his tail. Still, he didn't feel anything. It was as if that feeling of being struck by lightning when Yuan Qiuqiu touched his tail was a misperception. But no, he clearly felt there was something wrong when Yuan Qiuqiu touched him. While Mr. Grey Wolf was touching his big tail again and again to try to puzzle out that feeling, Yuan Qiuqiu was carrying Mou on her back to bring him home. The child was very thin and very light. He was much lighter than Mr. Grey Wolf. Although it was a bit strenuous to carry him, it didn't use up too much of Yuan Qiuqiu's energy. Little Yu didn't live far from Mr. Grey Wolf and her. If it wasn't a windy and snowy day, she could walk there in half an hour. However, carrying a child on her back and on a day when the snow was falling heavily, it took a lot more time than usual. By the time Yuan Qiuqiu carried Mou to that small cave, an hour had passed. Mou wasn't awake yet, but the fiend energy in his body had been cleared away. Yuan Qiuqiu stood at the entrance to the small cave and lightly called out, "Bo, it's me, Yuan Qiuqiu. I brought your older brother back." There was a rustling sound, which was followed by the heavy curtain being lifted up. The cute Mo Bo came out. Big Sister Qiuqiu. Mo Bo smiled at Yuan Qiuqiu. Her sparkling dark eyes turned. "Why are you here?" "Ah, second brother." Little Bo saw Mou on her back as well as the blood on him. Her little face immediately paled. She looked at Yuan Qiuqiu in panic. In a trembling voice, she asked, "Did he get beaten up by the wolf demons for being too mischievous?" Yuan Qiuqiu. What kind of image had Moyu set up for himself in front of his younger sister? "Big Sister Qiuqiu, come in first." Little Bo stood on her tiptoes and forcefully pushed the animal skin curtain to the side. Yuan Qiuqiu hesitated for a moment. After checking that there was no fiend energy on her body, she nodded at Bo and carried Little Yu into the cave. Mou's home was very small. After entering, Yuan Qiuqiu smelled smoke and a rather strong scent of blood too. Near the entrance of the cave, there was a stove made with a lot of stones. A few steps in, and there was a small wooden table that was covered with stuff. Around a slight curve in the cave, there were two beds. There was a small wooden bed with lighter colored animal skin. That was probably Little Bo's bed. The other wooden bed was very large. It was about the same size as Mr. Grey Wolf and her bed. It was probably the bed where Bo's grandpa and her two older brothers slept on. On the big bed, there was an old man, who was half sitting up, and a cat demon teenager, who was lying down. Big Sister, put second brother down next to big brother. Mo Bo was obviously very worried. Yuan Qiuqiu listened to her and put Little Yu down on the bed. Little Yu got hurt. Grandpa Mo seemed more lively than before. His previously murky eyes had become bright and clear. He had a clearer speech pattern too. Chapter 79. This was the handiwork of Grey Wolf Tian Luo. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yuan Qiuqiu was a bit surprised, and she wasn't sure how to answer Grandpa Mo's question. She hesitated on answering and glanced at the unknowing Little Bo. Grandpa Mo, Bo, I invited little you to my home to play, but there's fiend energy inside my home. Little you has a weak body, and he got injured from the fiend energy. Wanchocho continued to say, but I fed my husband's treasure water to little you, and there's nothing seriously wrong with him now. Mo both blinked. Extremely puzzled, she asked, what's fiend energy? Wanchocho. Grandpa Mo briefly smiled. He slowly said, little Bo, Grandpa knows what fiend energy is. Grandpa Mo narrowed his eyes. There's good and bad fiend energy. Bad fiend energy will hurt humans. Wanchocho found his explanation strange. Based on her knowledge of this world, there was no such thing as good fiend energy. All fiend energy would greatly harm humans and demons. Just as Wanchocho was puzzled over this, little Bo asked the question she wanted to ask, Grandpa, what about good fiend energy then? Good fiend energy Grandpa Mo furrowed his brows. His gaze was somewhat empty. He thought about it for a long time before finally saying, although good fiend energy causes a lot of pain and discomfort, it'll make you feel very sweet inside. Mo Bo scratched her head. If it hurts a lot, isn't that bad fiend energy? Little Bo didn't understand at all, and Wanchocho didn't get it either. Little Bo wanted to ask more questions, but Grandpa Mo seemed to have sunk back into his forgetful self. He blankly looked at the cave's entrance and wouldn't say another word. Mo Bo sighed like an elderly person. She seemed used to Grandpa Mo gaining clarity from time to time. She apologetically looked at Wanchocho and said, Grandpa is always like this. Big Sister Chocho, wait a moment. I'll get you something to eat. Wanchocho would find it too shameful to eat their food. She leaned down and thanked little Bo for her offer and also said, when your second brother wakes up, tell him to stay at home. I'll come visit him in 2 days. Okay. Mo Bo was very happy. Big sister, you have to come back to play with us. No one in the tribe is willing to play with us. She fell silent and her expression looked lonely. Wanchocho's heart softened. She patted little Bo's head. As long as you're not scared of me, I'll definitely come back. We're not scared. Mo Bo shook her head. You and brother.in.law are both good people. Wanchocho. Wanchocho almost couldn't keep her expression from changing when she heard the little kid saying brother.in.law. She increasingly thought that although little Bo was young, it didn't mean that she didn't know anything. The words she said were very sweet too. Thinking of Mr. Grey Wolf, who was alone at home, Wanchocho asked, why did you say that? My husband is a good person. Because he made sure we had enough food and firewood in past winters. Even though brother.in.law is a scary grey wolf and occasionally acts ferocious, it's fine as long you don't get close to him. He doesn't eat children. When he was around, those other wolf demons wouldn't bully us. We wouldn't be hungry either. Little Bo's words echoed in Wanchocho's ears as she walked home in the snow. Thinking of little Bo's description of Mr. Grey Wolf, Wanchocho quirked up her lips. Ferocious, doesn't eat children. What kind of compliment was that? She had seen for herself that Mr. Grey Wolf wasn't as brutal as the rumors said he was. Could it be that his reputation was so bad because he liked to beat up to those rotten demons? The sky was getting increasingly dark, and the falling snowflakes were getting bigger. Snowflake after snowflake fell on Wanchocho. As she lightly walked in the snow on her body melted and soaked through her clothes and shoes. Although she was very tired, she had gained a lot today. She had found out the location of herbs, successfully traded for a rabbit, and guessed that there was probably a connection between the fiend energy in Mr. Grey Wolf and the curse. She had also made new friends even if they were little kids and an old grandpa. As Wanchocho recalled what she had gained today, she continued walking and contemplating what her next step should be. The food and firewood could last a little bit longer, so she should focus on finding a way to get the herbs that were growing on the cliff. Chapter 80. This was the handiwork of Grey Wolf Tian Luo. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Now that Wan Qiuqiu wasn't carrying little Yu, her walking speed was fairly fast. She returned to the cave's vicinity within half an hour. She was about to run out of energy, but she still decided to go check on the trap she had dug in the morning before it got dark. Wan Qiuqiu used the spear as a walking stick and quickly arrived in the grove of evergreen trees near the cave. From a distance, she could see that part of the covering for her trap had collapsed. Did she catch prey with her trap? Wan Qiuqiu's eyes lit up. Unable to wait, she scampered over and got a clear look of the trap. Half buried by a pile of snow, some of the leaves had been gnawed to pieces and the small piece of jerky she had placed there was gone. There were obvious signs of struggle and talon prints around the trap, but there was nothing in the trap except for a few feathers. Wan Qiuqiu was especially disappointed. She had thought she had caught something with her trap. She wasn't willing to give up. She crouched down and rummaged through the trap to check if there was anything under the snow. Touching a cold, hard object, Wan Qiuqiu widened her eyes. She had just casually dipped her hand to check. She had actually found something. Enlivened, she put down the spear. No longer caring about the cold snow, she used both hands to dig. The pile of snow wasn't particularly thick, so it didn't take Wan Qiuqiu much time to dig out the hard and round object. It was an egg. This egg was much bigger than modern-day eggs and was worth 5 of them. Was this an egg from a giant bird? Taking a careful look, the talon marks on the side of the trap were quite big. If this egg was from a large bird, then her shallow trap wouldn't have been able to keep it trapped. That bird probably had laid an egg out of nervousness. Although the egg was a bit dirty, Wan Qiuqiu was extremely happy. She cleaned the egg with snow, set up the trap again, and decided to come back tomorrow to dig a deeper hole. Wan Qiuqiu's cold red hands trembled as she held the egg she had accidentally gained. Wan Qiuqiu, who hadn't eaten in a day, gulped. Several ways to cook an egg appeared in her mind. Scrambled egg, fried egg, boiled egg, steamed egg, baked egg, egg soup, etc. However, boiled egg and steamed egg were the most suitable options based on what she had to work with. Either option should be quite delicious. After all, this was such a big egg laid by a bird in a fantasy world with spiritual energy. Wan Qiuqiu was already impatient, but just in case, she probed the egg with spiritual energy to check if there was an unborn chick inside. It wasn't that she was too soft-hearted and wouldn't eat if there was an unborn chick inside, but that if there was a small life in the egg, she would get Mr. Grey Wolf to use his big tail to hatch the egg. Anyways, that wolf could only lie in bed right now, and his tail was fairly warm. After the chick was hatched, they would raise it, fatten it, and then eat it. She was so cruel. Either way, she was going to eat it, and she even wanted to use the wolf's tail to hatch it. The very cruel Qiuqiu swept her spiritual energy through the egg. After confirming there was no sign of life, she carried the giant egg towards the cave while grinning from ear to ear. With this egg, Mr. Grey Wolf and her would be able to have a good meal tonight. However, before cooking this egg, she should take a bath first. Wan Qiuqiu's stomach was rumbling with hunger. Shivering in the wind and snow and sodden with melted snow, she felt so uncomfortable. It had been a long time since she had left the cave. The melted snow water had probably been boiled away by now, and it would take a while before she could drink hot water when she went back. Wan Qiuqiu didn't feel upset or helpless. She opened the animal skin curtain that was more tattered than the one at Grandpa Mo's home and happily shared the joy of picking up an egg with Mr. Grey Wolf, who was still lying on the bed. Mr. Food Reserve, we have an egg to eat tonight. There was excitement in her voice. Wan Qiuqiu put the egg down on the stone table and noticed there was a bowl of warm water on the stone table. Surprised, she turned around to look at the stone stove and saw there was a pot of steaming hot water in the stone pot instead of the empty pot she had expected. There was also extra melted snow in the wooden basin. One glance was enough to know that this was the handiwork of Grey Wolf Tianluo. T/N. Just in case it was too long ago, Lillian_Cho explained in the chapter part 40's comments that Tianluo is referring to a Chinese folktale called the Snail Girl. In the folktale, the snail girl secretly cleans the house and does all the housework out of gratitude for the farmer who saved her.